such a time as this.
And welcome back to Such a Time as This, the place where there is no such thing as a silent witness. One of the big things that is going on in our culture today, and we will continue to update you, is this push towards the social justice, social gospel, critical race theory. And one of their big things is that they want to make the gospel applicable to systems, to people groups. That comes from the Marxist ideology that you do not see people as individuals, you see them as people groups, and it has infiltrated the church through this critical race theory. Anyway, want to deal with some verses, and then I'll show you Tim Keller, who seems to be providing the theological foundation for critical race theory people. But I want to look at the scriptures real fast. In the book of Jeremiah, when he is speaking to the house of Israel and speaking about the new covenant, in Jeremiah 31:29 says, "In those days they shall no longer say, the fathers have eaten sour grapes and the children's teeth are set on edge, but everyone shall die for his own iniquity. Each man who eats sour grapes, his teeth, his teeth will be set on edge." And later on in Jeremiah 31, "And no longer shall each one teach his neighbor and each his brother, saying, Know the Lord, for they shall all know me, from the least of them to the greatest, declares the Lord. For I will forgive their iniquity, and I will remember their sin no more." The gospel is applicable to human hearts, dealt with humans on an individual basis. Does God see people group? Yes. Does he see the nation of Israel? Yes. Does he judge countries? Yes. Will he judge this country? I hope so. But when it comes to salvation, that's not a corporate issue. That's not a corporate thing. And it seems as though this is being given a big push, that the gospel is here to change systems, not the individual hearts of men. So let me play, seems like the godfather of the theology of critical race theory within the church, Tim Keller. 3 short clips, and we'll comment on them.
Let me go one step further, though. And John has already alluded to this, and I'll get back to this in a minute. Go to Romans 5, and you get into the very heart of what's called classic federal theology. At the heart of classic Protestantism has always been this teaching. In Romans 5, Paul goes way beyond the idea that you are responsible for what other members of your family did, and he goes way beyond you are responsible for what other members of your culture do. He says you are responsible and you are condemned for what your ancestors Adam and Eve did.
Not true.
That is, just by virtue of being in the entire human race, you're responsible for things that you didn't individually do. You are condemned for what they do. And then, of course, he turns around and says, but by connection to Jesus Christ, you can be saved, not because of what you have done, but through your connection to him by faith. The whole structure of the gospel is based on corporate responsibility. If you really want to go all the way down and say, I'm only responsible for what I have done, and only I have done, there is no gospel.
That's just simply not true. That is awful theology. That is the twisting of scriptures. Am I affected by what Adam did? Absolutely. Do I stand condemned because of sin that has been passed off through Adam and the human race? Absolutely. But to say that I'm responsible, no, it affects me. But to say that I am responsible, that's a twisting of the scriptures. And what it does is it starts to kick what the gospel does. It kicks it from the human heart to people groups. And that's just simply not true. Since he wants to go to Romans 5, let's go there. Romans 5:12, therefore, just as sin came into the world through one man, and death through sin, and so death spread to all men because all sin. Absolutely true. I am affected by what Adam did. Absolute. But when it comes to the gospel, For if because of one man's trespass death reigns through that one man, much more will those who receive the abundance of grace and the free gift of righteousness reign in life through the one man, Jesus Christ. Look at it again. Much more will those who receive the abundance of grace. That's the gospel. Those who receive. The question is, how do you receive? Do you receive the grace through the gospel, through people groups? Absolutely not. It's individual. The gospel is applied to individual hearts, not systems, not people groups. And that is where the twisting, my friend, goes. If you think I'm wrong, the entire message will be in the description. But if you think I'm wrong, he says it again. Watch.
Have you got the eyes to see systemic evil? Or are you a typical white Westerner? I know a lot of you aren't white and a lot of you aren't Westerners, but I'm particularly looking to you. Do you have the eyes to see that kind of thing? And if you do see them, do you take responsibility? Now, lastly, how does the gospel actually address this? On the one hand, you've got to keep in mind that just converting some individual with the gospel, if the system needs to be dealt with, won't be enough to deal with racism. I mean, to me, the most dramatic example.
Converting the individual without dealing with the system is not enough to deal with racism. False. Absolutely false. Again, the gospel is applied to human hearts, not systems. The gospel is not designed to deal with systems. You know who's designed to deal with systems? Jesus, when he comes back. He's going to deal with the systems. He's going to make things right. Running out of time. Here's the third one in which he's confusing the gospel and what it does as opposed to individuals and systems. Here's the last one.
You already heard me say something about this. If you begin to understand gospel theology, the idea that a lot of people say that the very doctrine that Adam and Eve's sin is imputed to me, so I'm guilty, and now when I believe in Jesus Christ, not only are my sins put on Christ, but his righteousness is put on me, and I'm clothed in the righteousness of Christ. I've seen people criticize in reviews of John's book saying Reformed theology, Protestant theology, classic imputed righteousness theology is individualistic and it's no help. And I'm trying to say, are you kidding? Have you read this? To me, the reason that I have been able to get beyond my individualism and start to think in terms of corporate responsibility is because of the gospel.
Do you see what it just said? Did you see what it just said? You see the bait and switch. That imputed righteousness doesn't go to the individual heart. The question is, if he were to dare take questions theologically on this, the question is, if imputed righteousness is not imputed to the individual heart, then what is it imputed to? Systems? Systems? Where does the imputed righteousness goes if not to the individual? But that's not what Tim Keller does. It is a warping of the gospel. Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, this critical race theory and this system mentality, it is a different gospel. It is dangerous. Please, please, please don't fall for it. Jesus Christ died for those who would accept him, to those, the individuals who would respond to his grace, to those he gave them the right to become sons of God. Don't be confused. This critical race theory stuff. Don't be confused. We're here. We've got you. We'll point out this dangerous stuff. Don't you worry.
For such a time as this.